Okay, and let's go ahead and give this a shot. We are now going to go ahead and try the first Automaton podcast. This is, of course, assistant editor Graham Arthur, and I'm joined by one of our primary writers, and in this case, MC for the day, Peter Martin. How you doing
All
today,
right. MC. I didn't know I was getting a title.
I figured we'd go ahead and add a little something for everyone with this one.
Oh, that's great. We should give titles to everybody then.
Well, hopefully we're going to be joined by James next time, and of course he's going to be the master and commander, or something.
Didn't that end with some rape?
Either or he's actually schizophrenic. I always get Russell Crowe movies mixed up.
Okay. Well, okay. Maybe that's not how we want to start the very first one.
Edit that.
Yeah, it was the culmination of Fight Week this week. We ended up with the launch of Mortal Kombat 10 or Mortal Kombat X. I don't know if it's actually 10 iterations. Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it is 10. It kind of did the Mario Kart thing for a while, where it was numerical and then stopped being numerical, and then they arbitrarily jumped back in with numbers, I think at 9, which was very confusing to me because I did not realize there had been 9 up to that point.
Yeah, and the company or the developers that made this are the same people who made Injustice. And these two games look almost exactly the same.
Wasn't Justice any good? I never got around to playing it.
I only played it a little bit. A friend of mine had it. So this was kind of what we were talking about earlier, where I'm just not actually deep into video games, deep into fighting games. Being not deep into video games would be a real professional issue at the moment.
Yeah. So what do you write about every week? Cribbage, mostly.
A bunch of stuff I don't understand, stuff.
Other things.
But the culmination of that review was actually that I'm not a big fighting fan, and that made, for me, the whole point of the review then, because one of the last things I said was people who are into Mortal Kombat or those kind of games, they know they're going to get it. They know they're going to like it. Whereas I was essentially a newbie. I'd played it randomly with friends, like when it was at a friend's house or something, and I just slapped the controller as hard as I can. Well, yeah, that's what you do when you don't know the combinations, and your friends don't give you a chance to learn. So you just go as fast as you can and hope something happens. And what I was really looking for were the tools there for new players to learn how to play the game, because I couldn't finish the tutorial, which was ridiculous to me.
To not be able to get through what is the setup for the entire game, that just seems ridiculous. And I'm not saying that it's not plausible, but it feels like it's defeated the entire purpose of why you're here and what you're supposed to be doing there.
Well, a tutorial, yes. Like if you can't finish the tutorial, it's not teaching you whatever it's supposed to be doing. Like if a tutorial for a shooting game doesn't teach you how to reload the gun, you're done. You don't know, you can't play the game. If the tutorial for a fighting game doesn't teach me how to master, let's say, 2 basic combinations, I can't keep going.
No, well,
you got to learn how to juggle. That's one of the first things in most of the recent fighting games, like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. And a lot of these games have a juggling mechanic where that's where you have a chance to rally if you're starting to lose. Because if you can get them up in the air and you can juggle them, you can get some back.
Which is an entire subgenre of the fighters. I mean, that's something that I remember that was a huge deal in Killer Instinct when that game dropped, is the ability to basically put people up in the air and just, as soon as you got them into the corner and just started bouncing them around for a while, the fight was over. And for some people, that's why the Killer Instinct was the Killer Instinct. Why did I just turn into a 1920s cartoon? Killer Instinct is one of the definitive fighters from the 16-bit generation, and then for people such as me, it was just a massive frustration fest because I preferred kind of the more standard ground fight, if you will.
Yeah, so I was always most successful when it was like high punch, low punch, and maybe parry. Not block so much, but you could kind of block some moves, and those were the ones I did better at than things where you had big combos or big things and superpowers. It just that again because I'm not invested in it.
Did you ever do Battle Area Toshidan?
No, I don't think so. No.
Okay. okay, that was a great example of one where blocking wasn't a huge mechanic, but parrying definitely was, and it was one of the first ones where you could really, you didn't move in true 3D fashion, but basically you didn't just all exist on a straight line. You had the ability to kind of pivot and change where you were interacting with your
Oh, so
opponent from.
you could sidestep, yeah, essentially.
Exactly right. Sidestep, you
Okay.
can circle around them. Yeah, good times, good times. I recommend trying to find it.
Well, so I basically just buy stuff, fighting games that are on sale.
A great
That's
approach to anything.
yeah, because I know I'm not gonna get online. I'm not gonna compete. I'm not gonna be really putting the effort in to learn. Let's because I think all the characters have about 20 moves that are special to that character. So the developers go crazy, really putting in unique aspects to each character, which is really what you want. But to learn them is a real investment in time.
Right.
And I'm just not that committed to winning Mortal Kombat 10. I do really want to totally destroy the single player story, which is way better than I thought it would be.
Is who are you maining as right now? Who is your character of choice for Mortal Kombat 10?
Now, this is where I embarrass myself because, as I actually said in my article, I don't bother to learn anyone's name. I give them nicknames, and they're all really annoying. I really like Bug Lady.
Ah, Bug Lady. Ooh.
Bug Lady's pretty hot. And Lizard Guy, he's pretty cool. And so anyone who actually cares about the game is now really offended, and I'm sorry.
Well, it's okay. I mean, as long as Amish Hat and Blue Ninja way back in, that's all I care about.
No, it was the one. So I was online and I'm playing Sub Zero, and I was like, "Hey, what is Elsa's moves?" And my friend, he got really angry at me. He's like, "What do you mean, Elsa?" I'm like, "Look, it's just Elsa, man. He's got ice power. It's Elsa." Not realizing that Elsa, having a 5-year-old daughter, Elsa is way more important to my life than Sub Zero. So the first name that comes to my mind when you say ice power is Elsa.
I think it's very telling, and we can definitely, at a future, get into how Disney has completely ruined our interpretation of adult video games. But
Yep.
I think that that's a fair nickname.
Yeah, so Bug Lady's pretty good. I like the Sun God guy. He actually has a name. Sun God dude, he was the first fatality I managed to pull off. He's the first set of special moves I managed to pull off. He's big, he's laborious. That seems to work for me. The nimble characters I don't do so well, but the big lumbering oafs are the ones I succeed at.
Now that's really okay. So, okay, no. See, my problem is also I fell out of love with the franchise right around when it really started to get overly complicated. The last one I played was for the GameCube, which was Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliances, and that's when they started to introduce weapons, which is something that made no sense to me coming from Super Nintendo Mortal Kombat, and basically it just being hand to hand, fist to fist, punch you into the pit kind of dealio. So I don't know a majority of the new characters at all. So I
Yeah,
was just
so
there is someone who
yeah,
looks like God.
I saw the movies. This is terrible. I saw the 2 movies. The second one was really bad, and they had a TV show for a while. And I watched the TV show, and it made no sense at all. And that's most of my knowledge. And I know they had Jason in there, and they're bringing him back.
Yeah, Jason's gonna be. I think Jason is actually patched in with the newest PlayStation 4 updates.
Yeah, when you load the game right now, a picture of Jason shows up sometimes, and it says "coming soon." So I know he's coming up. I went on to the Wikipedia page to look at any other sort of characters that have been in the game, and I think like Freddy was in there. Like basically all horror characters seem to have been in there.
Right, Freddy was Mortal Kombat 9, and if you've read recent updates on the Automaton.a website, you would know that Predator is also being available.
Yes, I did read that from Automaton, strangely enough. I actually read the site that we both work for. Yeah. So there's the Predator is going to be in there. Since the thing is owned by Warner Brothers, I don't see why. Well, I guess they probably will. They're just going to throw in every Warner Brothers property they can think of sooner or later.
I mean, that's basically the future of fighting games, is that it's just going to turn into a giant Mugen fest, like depending on who owns what. I mean, that's ultimately the reason that every company is buying stock in one another. Disney now owns Star Wars and Marvel for future hopes of just the biggest cast of Disney Infinity that you can imagine.
Well, there's that, and I totally forget what I was just about to say. This will have to be edited. Nah, it was Warner Brother Properties. Nah, it's okay. It's gone. You said Star Wars. That erases every other thought in my brain right now.
Were you thinking about a great mix-in with Bugs Bunny and Wile E. Coyote being able to fight Shao Kahn?
That would be actually pretty cool. Oh no. So sorry. We'll take a pause so you can edit properly. Yes. Soul Calibur. I had the one with Darth Vader, but there was another one with Yoda. And I don't know if you had to buy downloadable content, but it was one for each system. I think PlayStation had Yoda and Xbox had Darth Vader, or vice versa. And then you could, as DLC, you could buy the other one, which somehow really pissed me off. Because you could have just given us both and I would have been so happy.
But instead you're going to have to pay an extra $5 in order to pick up whichever one wasn't on your system. And since you had the PlayStation, that one was Darth Vader, and Xbox got Yoda out the box.
Yeah, I forget which was which, but it was one got the other character, and yeah, that felt like a squeeze for money when it didn't have to be. Because this is fan service. This is just trying to make fans, like the Soul Calibur series and the Star Wars series, they do not have a crossover.
There's nothing.
And they did, in the story for that, they did try to explain it, which was awesome, because it's like Darth Vader feels an energy power through the Force, so he goes to check it out and then fights people with a lightsaber. And he meets like anime chicks in underwear.
I mean, it's legitimate enough unless you know anything about lightsabers, and then it just kind of becomes a whole, well, shouldn't he just automatically win? I mean,
well, but the Soul Calibur things are magic, and some of them come from hell, so I don't know how that works into the Star Wars universe, but yeah, you could say my magic sword matches your lightsaber.
It's one of those dangerous territories where when you get enough fan service in one place, one person claims that their fan service is stronger than the other, and then the argument heats up, and then you just see the headline, 13 dead at Comic-Con.
Your fan service, your lack of faith in my fan service is disturbing.
Oh, that would have been great, and I'm really hoping for a massacre this summer.
Yeah, so there's nothing to get away from that. Sorry, we should get back to actual stuff we've done.
Yes. Back to fighting games.
So the one I wanted to talk about that I didn't get to write about in the week because I just didn't have time was God Hand, because it was, I think, it wasn't the same type. It wasn't like player versus player. It was run around, fight everybody who gets in your way kind of thing. But God Hand somehow made all the fighting better, even though it was a really hard game. And like you and I were talking previously, when it was released, it was essentially broken. Like it wasn't finished. Yeah, it wasn't finished. It had like big empty spaces that clearly were supposed to have something in it. Sometimes the mechanics would just go weird, but I loved that game. And it was weird because it just, everything that you would complain about a video game was in there, but it didn't matter because you had so much fun playing it.
Yeah, I mean, God Hand was, I believe we would call it a beat 'em up or a brawler. And it's crazy because it was later in the PlayStation 2's life. It was basically towards the end of that whole cycle, because it was, God, what would that be? 2000, 2006, 2007?
Yeah. That was one of the last games I was able to get for the PlayStation 2 before basically they just weren't releasing any big titles for it anymore.
Exactly. And I mean, that, like, believe it or not, that game was directed by Mikami, by the dude who does a majority of the Resident Evil and the Evil Within games. And so, like, you can feel like a little bit of his touch like bleeding throughout. I mean, it's not like enemies just jump out and scare you while you're busy punching them in the face, but there's kind of an aesthetic to it that bleeds through, that if you really like if you like look at the other works that he's done, you're like, oh yeah, I can definitely see his influence all over the place here.
Yeah, and it was just weird. I mean, that to me, I think was the appealing point. It was just really, really weird. Like there was the gorilla that kept coming back and he would get upset and run away. There was the 5 midgets that were like the Power Rangers.
Yep.
But the tagline for the game was it's tough but fair. And that to me was the feeling that came across most, was that I died a lot, but if I actually played more seriously, or I tried harder, or I learned three more moves, I could actually get through everything. And I finished that game like 2-3 times through. It doesn't get easier with each playthrough. That was the weird part.
So even though you had a lot of experience with it, you still just found yourself not necessarily struggling in the same areas, but there was still like the pressure.
There was always a challenge, yeah. And if you weren't thinking about what you were doing, if you weren't working towards the goal that was given to you, you would just get overwhelmed. They did a lot of surrounding you, so you'd fight back and forth between 2 or 3 groups. But you were always, yeah, it was always multiple groups by the thing. By the end of any level, you were fighting probably 2 separate groups at the same time.
That is awesome. God, is there any way to do PlayStation 2 games on the PlayStation 4, or is that just right out?
No, they've locked this down. If they were smart, they would be releasing all the PlayStation 2 stuff on PSN now. But they're holding out for, I don't know, something.
It's this weird thing where clearly they like to capitalize on the nostalgia of players, and we can get into this at another time. I've just had to refer to PlayStation 2 as nostalgia. But basically, players love to play games of yesteryear. They love to get into things that they played when they were younger, or even just games that they never got an opportunity to get into. But we can't without having access to the physical games themselves, and often the older system. And that doesn't like that's not profitable to Sony. Like they're not seeing any money from me buying a PlayStation 2 from the frickin' recycle shop. That's just money right into the hands of whatever grifter decided to sell that.
I actually still have one in my closet, so it would just, for me, if I could actually find the physical disc, but they're basically all gone now. It's impossible to find. I don't know where all these discs go.
Um, it's a nice collection of people who want them just to put them on a shelf, and so they're taking them out of circulation. And then every so often there are weird groups of people who are just going around trying to destroy old media to help further new media. Believe it or not, that is a thing. That's what I found
That's
out.
not true. I can't.
That is absolutely true. That's absolutely.
I,
Check out what I wrote about Shaq Fu. I know it's not a great example in comparison to Godhand, but swear to God, there are groups of people out there who are looking for physical copies of Shaq Fu just to smash them to basically alleviate the game from its earthly prison. It's like a cult.
oh man, that's 2 cult references in one go. We're getting in trouble.
Well, we haven't mentioned the big cult yet, so as long as we don't talk about Ooze Cray, Tom Cray. Wait, I did that wrong.
No, I think that was okay. I think that was close. It's for everyone. There's actually a couple people watching this. You're about to hear noise outside my house, and it's because politics is in right now. They're doing a mayoral vote in my town.
Oh, are they just doing that in your town now?
Yeah, they're driving around with the van, shouting out the person's name.
Yep. See, totally aside, that's one of the very bizarre parts of living as a foreigner in Japan is dealing with the relentless, endless political propaganda at select points in the year and having it in no way affect you other than I can't sleep.
Yes, because they start at exactly 8 o'clock. They were rolling by my house at 8 o'clock this morning, and I didn't have to set my alarm. I just click on. It's like, "Good morning. Please vote for Mr. Osawa. Good morning," and that's all they say. There's no actual political content. There's no ideas. It's just if we say the name enough when you go to vote, you might click that name. That's what they're banking on. Anyways, sorry, that's totally off topic. It's
no, that's another thing. Yep. Oh shit, where were we? But yeah, so yes, so is
back to fighting games.
Segue. Yes, fighting games. Um, yeah, one game that I really did want to get to this week that we unfortunately did not have a chance to cover was the aforementioned Mugen. And that's simply put, there wasn't a good segue, there wasn't a good opportunity for me to write about it. And really, once I finally got everything cemented down, I don't think that there was enough to write about that would have necessarily interested everyone. And it's a shame because I love the idea of Mugen. I love the execution, especially the fact that now that it is no longer as popular as it used to be, the updates for it are actually getting better. But it's something. What can I? how can I put this? It's like when I discovered there are people who do fantasy football every year, and they do it with the original Nintendo Tecmo Bowl. And so they actually have ROM hackers who go in and reprogram the game every year to make a new version of the original NES Tecmo Bowl with current rosters and stats from players who are alive today, who are in the leagues today. And that sounds insane, and that sounds like such a crazy amount of dedication. But that's what's been going on with Mugen. There are people who go out of their way to find the best captures they have for all the sprites of different fighting characters from every system in existence and many that aren't, and to get them properly calibrated and imported and have their move sets coded in so that they look as good on Mugen as they could look on any 2.5D fighter.
So if you're talking about number of characters, approximately how many are you talking? Because that sounds like 100, 200. Like that's a
The
lot
cop,
of.
well, the copy that because I actually grabbed a copy of it because technically Mugen's one of those gray area things where it's like if you have this, please make sure that any and all characters that you have in it, you own the media that they actually come from. So it's like one of those gray area kind of deals. But the version that I have has 1,082 characters in it.
1,000.
1,082 characters in it.
So how long is it taking if you're going to play the game? Just say you're going to sit down and play for an evening. How long is it taking you to pick a character just to scroll
Well,
through?
well, I mean, when things get that big, it's more of just a it's more of just basically your waving your internet dick in everyone's face because you want to say this is how many characters I have, and that. But just like with Mortal Kombat now, how many selectable characters do they have in Mortal Kombat X now?
So I bought the basic one with no DLC. So my friend bought the one. It was sort of the initial complete package. I'm gonna have to do a quick number in my head.
Yep,
Maybe 20, maybe a little bit more.
that's
And
even pretty.
they have about
Yeah.
4 or 5 that are shaded out that you can buy. So again, my friend bought the complete package or DLC and stuff, and so they're shaded out on mine. But he can pick like it's Goro and I say that with a Japanese accent, um, Goro and all these other characters. A couple characters, sort of more the from the first games. Those ones you can buy as extra, but again, not being a particularly good player, it doesn't make a difference to me.
Right,
But for a
right.
fan, I actually think that would be a big deal.
Yeah, and I mean it's the same thing with, for example, the other like one of the big fighters is Smash Brothers, obviously, and Smash Brothers shipped with I think 50 characters available, if that you could unlock just through normal play,
Yeah.
and that's even an enormous number. And I never have to sit there and agonize over which character I'm going to choose every time. I'm either going to be Link or I'm going to be Donkey Kong. Those are basically my two. And I
I
think
always just choose a woman.
well,
Those are who I relate to the most in these things. So I always just choose a woman.
we're gonna have to get on the couch about that one eventually.
All right.
Talk that through, but I think it's the same thing with Mugen. I think with that, like players basically either have a character or a set of characters that they always choose from, or they have no problem just hitting the random button and whatever happens happens. And I mean, for things like this, you look at games like Marvel versus Capcom 2. That again was a game that had just a ridiculously large roster, and it's pick one character or don't care about the characters you pick. And Mugen kind of offers this wonderful variety where it's you could go ahead and just have a preset fight of like maybe 20 matches and you don't know who you're going to end up fighting. You have no idea. You could be doing classic Street Fighter characters. You might end up having your Street Fighter character versus the Soul Calibur characters. There are obviously uniquely created characters. I ran across a project where one man, his children are super into Harry Potter, and so he's doing a modification where basically it's a wizard dueling game, and he's been hunting and making the sprites to basically incorporate all of the well-known wizards from the books into it, so that his kids can have Draco fight against Hermione and things like that.
That's
So like,
awesome.
isn't it?
I'm not that much of a father. I would never do that for my kids.
Uh,
Oh man, that is actually really cool though.
Yeah, and I mean they can't completely edit the game so it's like, oh, instead of fighting now you cast spells. But so it's still a fighter at heart, but they can make it so that there are projectile weapons primarily, and they can go ahead and reduce it so that punch and kick damage does next to nothing because you're a child wizard. How hard can you slap?
Do you remember the Harry Potter game that looked like Gears of War?
Harry Potter game that looks like
So they had a Harry Potter game. It was before the Lego games. I think it was back when I was playing on the 360, and it was Harry Potter, and he has his wand, and he has shoulder level cover, and he would pop up and shoot. And I was like, oh, this is just Gears of War. This is ridiculous. I'll find a link to it. It looked awful. I never played it, but that was, oh man, I actually was kind of tempted just because I was like, that's the weirdest combination, but it kind of makes sense. Because yeah, Harry Potter in the movies, I haven't read the books. In the movies, he basically just shoots crap out of his little wand all the time.
right, right. Just a quick search reveals that the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 for next gen systems is the one that felt very much like Gears of War with a lot of cover based shooting.
Yes, cover based shooting in a Harry Potter game is a weird concept, but that's what it was.
That is absolutely bizarre. But God, where were we? Yes, but so, and that's what I really wanted to kind of just give credit to with Mugen is the ability to take something and create an infinitely replayable game just by being able to patch in and patch out characters at any given time. And there are obviously very well crafted characters, and some are terrible. Some are just static images with sound bites piped in. Like, I found a video of SpongeBob SquarePants versus Barney the dinosaur, and neither sprite was done very well. But just to
That
watch
sounds awesome as well.
yeah, and that's what is so appealing about Mugen is that it is fan service made by fans for something that you didn't even know that you wanted. Like I had no concept of like a wizard dueling game until someone was like, "I'm making this for my kids," and I was like, "I would have loved to play that," or just the insane number of combinations that you can come up with. So the only problem is that at current it does not look like Mugen runs very well on Windows 8, and I think that's what kind of held me back from being able to do a review because I wasn't certain if I wanted to downgrade my system or get a whole new computer just to play this game. But man alive, I had a lot of fun with that back in college.
Yeah, so that's the same problem I ran into with I did the retrospective of Ragdoll Kung Fu and
Right.
loaded it up on Steam and it just wouldn't go. And I tried to fix it. I spent like 2 days trying to get the thing to work just so I could give sort of an honest review because maybe my memory isn't 100%. It was about it's about 10 years ago now that the game came out. And I bought it like a week after it was released. So I bought it 10 years ago. So my memory is it was super fun. It was super great. That actually might just be all nostalgia fogging because it was a unique idea. So maybe it's grown in my memory where in real life it was actually pretty poor. But yeah, I ran into the same thing. Just the technologies move so quickly that it's really hard to keep things working. Is ironic problem.
It's well, it's something that's why it's important for games to develop a really strong fan base, even if they aren't particularly successful, because that fan does keep the game alive. It does make it so that it keeps moving forward, and that's why games that maybe didn't even run so well years ago can run better now because fans took that time, they took that effort to go ahead and find patches for it, find ways that they themselves could go in and fix the code that some developer did not either recognize or didn't care enough to polish up and make it so that everyone within reason could go ahead and enjoy that game. And,
Yes.
So we're not really sure where Fight Week is if we're going to be bringing it back for the next iteration of whatever's coming out. But I would say that at least content wise, I would say for our own personal enjoyment, Fight Week was successful.
Fight Week was pretty good. I mean, it got us talking about a lot of games I hadn't thought about in a long time. So this is Ragdoll Kung Fu came up. I hadn't thought about it in 10 years. Just recently, we started just talking on the side, and God Hand popped into my head, and I'm like, oh, that was awesome. We should totally just go and find that game and play it again. That wouldn't have come up otherwise. So, yeah, theme weeks work for us just because it gets us to think about the games we've played in the past.
And I mean, that's one thing that we do really want to focus on here in Automaton. I mean, we're not going to be out there making sure that we have bleeding edge coverage of every single game as it drops, just because that's an environment that's heavily polluted right now. Everyone's doing that. A lot of people are being paid to do that, and a lot of people are being paid under the table to perhaps say a game is better or worse than it is. That's a completely different subject. We can get into it at a later time. But
Yes, we can ethics. We'll do ethics tomorrow.
we'll do the ethics class. We'll do your therapy class. We'll go ahead and talk about why Japan hates Western gamers. There are a variety of subjects I'm sure we can get into. But basically, being able to look back at games and appreciate them and talk about what made them memorable or what made them immemorable, ironically, is probably a good stance, especially for the
Yeah.
podcast. Yeah.
No, so the evolution of the game from where it started and where it came to now, because if you look at what we have now with Mortal Kombat 10 versus that arcade game that came out when I was, again, as sort of the end of high school for me,
Yep.
like the little static graphics with the fuzzy heads, but man, the blood spurt came out and you're like, oh my God, that's crazy. But now it's the fully rendered brain getting split in half. And you're kind of sitting there going, yeah, all right.
I couldn't believe that the fatalities as I could see them on my iPhone. Like, I can't believe that Mortal Kombat version that I've been playing, that again is not really a Mortal Kombat game. It's basically a tap 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 dead. But hey, it's exciting enough to get me to keep playing it. I can't believe that is what I can see versus back in the day when a pile of red pixels was enough to get everybody who ever had
Really
children
upset.
angry. So
Yes.
angry at Midway.
So I still won't let my kids in the room if I'm playing the game, though. That's just,
Oh,
I'm
God.
like, that's just too much for a human being to see. But I want to see them all.
Yeah. Kids, go wait in the hall. Dad has about 35 minutes worth of fatalities to figure out.
Yes, and that's what I'm going to go do now. So on that note,
All right. And I'm probably going to go ahead and figure out what our next theme is going to be. We've been talking a bit about possibly starting Mob Week in the near future, an organized crime game week.
organized crime.
Organized crime could be fun.
Yep.
Possibly, we might eventually need to get into an RPG week. But we need to have a little more of a focus than just RPG. Possibly.
RPG's pretty broad.
Well, I mean, one could argue that fighting games is pretty broad. Hint, hint.
Well, yes, but it was a good first experiment. And again, we were sort of focused on, okay, Mortal Kombat's coming out. Let's look at what we've played in the past. So each writer was able to bring something to the table, which was cool.
JRPGs that aren't ridiculous weak.
Oh, that's just not going to happen.
I know, it's an empty category. All right, so good first recording session.
Yep.
Go ahead, and we will go ahead and pick this up hopefully next week. We don't yet have a subject, but we will hopefully come together and think of one in the very near future.
All right.
Cheers.
We had at least 3 or 4 people watching, so thank you for watching.
Oh, we had people watching?
Yes, we have at least 2 live viewers right now. So we could say thank you to them and goodbye. Please check out automaton.am. This is where all the content comes from and who we are.
Right. All the things we've been referencing, that's on one website. So go ahead and check that out.
All right.
But thank you for joining us on this inaugural flight of the podcast. This has been Graham Arthur.
This is Peter Martin. Yeah, I know. I wasn't ready for that. Yeah, good. We'll see you next week.
All right. See you next time.